A major trade shakes up the NFL draft. How does it impact the Jets? And an expected cut is finally made. We'll talk about all of this and more on today's episode of the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday, April 5th, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you for making this show your first listen or your first watch every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit that subscribe button and you'll never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a thumbs up. It helps the channel out and it helps other Jets fans find Locked On Jets. Our episode today is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them Locked On sent you. Well, on today's show, we're going to talk about a major trade that was made yesterday in the NFL. It was not a trade the Jets made, but I think there are potential implications for the Jets. The Saints and the Eagles struck a trade, and it's a pretty complex trade, but what it boils down to is the Saints receive 2 first-round picks. They get 16, they get 19. The Eagles end up with a couple of day 2 picks. One of them's this year, one of them's in the future. And I think that there are 3 different angles I can analyze this from. The Eagles angle, the Saints angle, and the Jets angle. And I'm going to go ahead and guess that you are tuning into this show to hear the Jets angle. So I'll just briefly go over what I think at least the Eagles and Saints are thinking here. And you can go on to Locked On Eagles or Locked On Saints. They can give you more in-depth info and give you an idea as to whether I'm right or not. But for the Eagles, you have a general manager who just got a contract extension. So he knows he's going to be there a few years. They had 3 first-round picks. So essentially what they did was they added a couple of day 2 picks. They added a third-round pick this year and a future second-round pick in 2 years. And the general manager just got an extension, so he knows he's probably going to be around to make those picks. It's a little different if you're fighting for your job. Then you may value current picks a little bit more, but they essentially added 2 day 2 picks, and the expense was they just have to delay one of their first-round picks a year. And if you're the Eagles right now, you still have 2 first-round picks. They had 3, so really they retain 4 first-round picks over the next 2 seasons. It's just instead of 3 this year, 1 next year, now it's 2 this year, 2 next year. So pretty sensible deal for the Eagles, I think. The Saints, this is interesting. And the Saints part of this, I think, ties in potentially with the Jets, depending on what the Jets want to do. But the Saints, you now have 2 first-round picks. You have 16 and 19. And it's interesting that this happened at this point on the schedule, because this is the type of deal that would normally be done during the draft. You know, we're talking a mid-first-round pick. Usually you're trading for that on draft day because a player that you really like unexpectedly fell to you. You usually are not doing this 3.5 weeks before the beginning of the draft. And this makes me wonder, if you're acquiring a second-round pick, it's probably not a specific player you're targeting at 16 or 19. To me, and this is, again, I'm guessing here, but my educated guess is there's probably a player they're targeting higher, and they want to use this first-round pick as ammunition to move up. Again, and maybe it's a quarterback, because we know the Saints' quarterback situation has been unsettled over the last year since Drew Brees retired, and you have Jameis Winston and you have Taysom Hill, but that's not exactly a great quarterback situation there. So are they looking to move up for a quarterback? And maybe you package 16 and 19 together to move up. And there is some degree of recent precedent for something like this. 6 years ago was actually a trade involving the Eagles. They traded up from 13 to 8. They struck a deal with the Miami Dolphins. Now, they did not acquire an extra first-round pick. This was a straight move up. They moved up 5 slots, and they traded a couple of defensive players, Byron Maxwell and Kiko Alonso, to Miami. And then the Eagles ended up working out a second trade where they moved from 8 to 2, and they drafted Carson Wentz, a move that really kind of difficult to judge because Wentz was not a long-term starter, and they won the Super Bowl with him injured, but his play that year kind of helped them get home field, so I don't even know how you view Wentz, whether that was a successful move or not. But regardless of whether or not it was successful, you now wonder whether the Saints are looking to move up. And if they are looking to move up, well, there's a team in New York that could be a trading partner, because we know the Jets need a lot, and they're sitting there at 4 and they're sitting there at 10, and you can go a little crazy with the trade value chart. Now, I am not a person who really believes the trade value chart that all these teams use, the Dallas chart that was developed, way back in the 80s. The Cowboys came up with this chart that essentially teams all use now, and they assign a certain number of points to each pick as value. And when a team makes a trade, you always hear, well, this team gave up this many points, and this team got this many points in return. Essentially, whether or not you get the requisite number of points in the trade determines whether people view your deal as successful or not. I don't know whether the trade value chart actually is accurate when it comes to how valuable a pick is. But if you're looking at the trade value chart, again, the Saints have 16 and 19 now. Well, according to this trade value chart, 16 is worth 1,000 points, and 19 is worth 875 points. So if you package those two together, you have traded 1,875 points worth of picks. The Jets are sitting there at pick 4. According to the chart, pick 4 is worth 1,800 points. So Saints have 1,875 in these two first-round picks. Jets have 1,800. Saints are looking to move up potentially, and I'm guessing, I'm educated guess, no insider information, but educated guess, I'm thinking the Saints may want to be moving up for a quarterback. So that's actually a pretty good match point-wise if you're using, and that's the currency of the NFL. I don't think it should be the currency of the NFL, but that's the way teams value these picks. Not saying it's right, I'm just saying that's how they do it. So the Jets have a pretty good match there. And beyond that, if you really want to match this, the Jets happen to hold pick 111. And pick 111 is worth 72 points. So again, 16 plus 19 is 1875. 4 plus 111 is 1872. I mean, that's about as close of a match as you can get points-wise. Now, there are a few caveats you have to throw in here. First of all, we don't know that the Jets actually want to move down. We don't even know for sure that the Saints desperately want to move up for a quarterback. That's me making an educated guess, because I don't know that you would necessarily acquire an extra first-round pick 3 weeks out and give up a pair of day 2 picks, which are valuable, unless there's a specific player you're targeting. And if you're going to be that aggressive and you kind of need a long-term quarterback, my guess is that that's what you're doing. But the other consideration here is that for both top 5 picks and for quarterbacks, teams tend to throw out the trade value chart because the quarterback is so valuable. And there's something inherent to the quarterback position. Either having one helps you so much or not having one hurt you so much that it kind of transcends trades. And again, like top 5 picks, teams view them as very valuable. And they are very valuable, but when it comes to trades, teams typically overpay to get into the top 5. As valuable as top 5 picks are, lower picks are also pretty valuable. And I think teams tend to overrate how valuable a top 5 pick is and underrate how valuable picks below the top 5 are. So these are other considerations. So, I can sit here and tell you by the points chart that the Jets are a pretty good match if the Saints want to make a deal. But of course, that's not necessarily going to be the defining feature of a deal. It could be, though. And I think it's very interesting, especially if the Jets are interested in moving down. Because if you move down to 16-19, now you got 3 first-round picks. You got 3 top 20 picks. Now, that's opposed to 2 top 10 picks that you have right now. But that could be an interesting proposition for the Jets, and I think that things kind of match up. If the Saints are looking to move up for a quarterback, the Jets are obviously not going to be drafting a quarterback this year, so we'll see what happens. But I think that this could set up an interesting scenario, and I think that the Jets, in many ways, would be very logical trade partners for the Saints. But let's say the Saints call the Jets up. Let's say they offer Joe Douglas 16 and 19 for pick number 4. Would that be a good deal for the Jets? I've done a little research on the history of these picks, and I'm going to tell you what I found and whether or not in a normal draft having 16 and 19 is better than just having pick 4. That's ahead on this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Jets podcast. Of course, we're in the NFL offseason, and the draft is just a few weeks away. We're approaching the NHL and the NBA playoffs and college basketball. What a finish to their season last night. A tremendous comeback for Kansas, an absolute classic in the championship game. As the Kansas Jayhawks defeated North Carolina, Kansas wins its first national title since 2008. And no matter what you're betting on, BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, including this week's Masters Championships, along with odds, podcasts, and reviews for all the different leagues this season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. And you can bet on plenty. You can even bet on the NFL. There are props, there are odds available for the 2022 season. There are also ways you can bet on the upcoming NFL draft. So go to BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen every day, and be sure to follow Locked On NFL. Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And today we are talking about a trade that was made yesterday by the Eagles and the Saints, a trade that could conceivably have implications for the Jets if the Jets are interested in moving down in the first round from pick number 4, or maybe even pick number 10. But I think the focus is more on 4 just because of the way the value lines up and the fact, or it's not a fact, but the possibility the Saints could be looking to move up for a quarterback, and they'll probably want to get as high as possible in the upcoming NFL draft. Now, there's a question that comes with this, though. Would the Jets be well advised if the Saints called up and offered picks 16 and 19 for just pick number 4? Now, obviously, you'd like to get more, and I talked about in the last segment how frequently, when you're either moving up into the top 5 or you're moving up for a quarterback, sometimes you have to pay a premium. And of course, Joe Douglas would not be doing his job unless he asked for a premium. But let's say the Saints just weren't willing to do that. Let's say they drew the line in the sand. They said, you know what, our best offer is 16 and 19. We can't do better than that. You know, if you don't want, you can take the deal if you want, but if not, we're just not going to do the deal. Should the Jets take the deal? Now, every year's draft class is different, and what you're looking to accomplish in the draft is different from every team. But I wanted to take a look at recent NFL history and find out, in general, has it been better to have just the 4th pick, or would it be better to have the 16th and 19th picks? So I looked, and I actually did an article similar to this last week on GanggreenNation.com, because I was interested at looking at the potential trade package the Jets could make for a wide receiver. You know, when they tried to trade for Tyreek Hill a few weeks ago, they offered their 2 second-round picks and their 3rd-round pick. They did not offer the 10th overall pick. And I looked at, and if you look through the trade value chart, the value of the Jets' 2 second-round picks and their 3rd-round pick combined is roughly equal to the value of pick 10 overall. So I did this research. I looked through recent NFL draft history to find out, would you rather just have 10, or would you rather have 32, 38, and 69 altogether? And although the 2 packages match up pretty equally on the trade value chart, it was pretty obvious that you would rather have the 3 day 2 picks. If you had to choose between just 10 and the 3 day 2 picks, history shows you that you'd have more success just with the day 2 picks, 35, 38, and 69. So I wanted to do the same research. Would you rather have pick 4, or would you rather have 16 and 19 based on results in recent NFL history? I looked at this a few different ways. I looked at how many All-Pros were produced by 4, or how many All-Pros were produced combined by 16 and 19. I looked at salaries, because obviously you have to pay less for a guy the first 4 years, the lower they're taken in the first round. So even though you're drafting 2 players, it's conceivably they'll cost less. I also looked at seasons started, because not everybody's a Pro Bowler, not everybody's an All-Pro. There's some value in just getting a regular starter, and these actually came up pretty equally in most areas. I mean, All-Pros, it was relatively close. Pro Bowls, it was relatively close. If you're talking about how many players made All-Pro, how many players made a Pro Bowl, there's not a huge difference between just 4 and 16 and 19 combined. Your odds are obviously lower at 4 than they are at 16 or at 19, but you have to remember you get 2 shots at 16 and 19, so that increases your odds a bit. But it's relatively equal. The salaries were roughly equal. 16 and 19, you're paying a little bit less for the first 4 years in their rookie contracts, but it's negligible. The savings are negligible, so those would come out about equally. But the big difference is, and this is not going to be a surprise, there were, over the last 25 years, players who were drafted 16 and 19 had 234 combined seasons as a starting player in the NFL. Players picked at number 4 overall only had 164. So if you're looking for just regular players who are going to come in and play well, 16 and 19 gives you the edge. and everything else is equal. Elite level play, Pro Bowl, All-Pro is equal. Salaries are equal. And I think you also have to apply this to the Jets' position right now, where the Jets have so many needs. The Jets need so much right now. This is just not that good of a roster. And I think that the Jets are a team that they're in a position where they just need to add so much. So if all else is equal, and you have the chance to add, if your odds are roughly going to be equal to get an elite player, and the salaries are going to be equal, but you have a chance now to add 3 starters in the first round, 3 quality players in the first round versus 2. I think the answer is pretty obvious. I think if the Saints call with that offer, and listen, the Jets should definitely counteroffer. They should try and get more. But if it comes down to it, the Saints offer say take it or leave it, 16 and 19 for 4, the Jets should take it, because at the end of the day, your odds of hitting on a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro, when you get 2 shots at 16 and 19, probably about equal to what you have at 4. But your odds of getting quality players, guys who are going to be starters for you, are higher. So I think that based on what I've seen, and again, I took the last 25 years of data from all of these picks, if the Saints make that offer, the Jets should take it, because they need to add plenty of quality. Now, one position where the Jets have hopefully added quality this offseason is the tight end position. Of course, they signed C.J. Uzomah and Tyler Conklin, but that also meant that there was one tight end whose days seemed to be numbered with this team. He was expensive. The Jets would save a couple $1 million by cutting him, and for whatever reason, to this point in the offseason, he remained a member of the Jets. That changed yesterday. The Jets did make a change at the tight end position, and we'll talk about that ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast as we continue on this Tuesday. Of course, the NFL draft is probably the best avenue teams have to fixing their rosters when they're broken. And if your car or truck is broken, the best way to fix it is going to rockauto.com. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto, and you should know with the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So you have to endure this pointless and intimidating questioning, and you have to wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, and they're going to choose the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. Well, of course, you have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. So go to Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer, so you can save time and money while using them. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Tuesday. We've talked about the trade the Saints and the Eagles made yesterday. We talked about how it could conceivably impact the Jets. Of course, maybe it won't. Maybe the Jets just want to stay at 4 and pick the best player available there. But there was a transaction the team made yesterday, and it's not a surprising one. You knew it was a matter of time after the Jets signed C.J. Uzomah and Tyler Conklin, but the team finally made it official yesterday, and they released Ryan Griffin. Griffin spent 3 seasons with the Jets. He was a signing in the offseason in 2019. Originally was supposed to be a backup, and then Chris Herndon just had a nightmare 2019, which I guess kind of ended Chris Herndon's career. Herndon began the season suspended, got injured right as he was about to return, finally came back, played 1 game, got injured in that game, and Griffin was the primary tight end through that season. And he impressed many Jets fans that year as he caught 34 catches, caught 34 receptions, 320 yards, and most notably 5 touchdowns. This led the Jets to give him a contract extension in season, a contract extension I quite frankly thought was ill-advised at the time. It wasn't enough money to really get upset over, but I mean, I was pretty vocal during the 2019 season. I thought it was pretty obvious at the time, and this is on Joe Douglas, because it was obvious to me, it should have been obvious to Joe Douglas, that Griffin's production, which first of all was not that great, it was pretty clear that this was not going to be sustainable, because those 5 touchdowns, and really that's what kind of stood out. Those 5 touchdowns, if you look at them, there was a lot of broken plays on them where, there was a breakdown in coverage, or the Jets ran a fake or something like that, and Griffin ended up wide open. This was, there's a difference between scoring a touchdown because you're beating a guy in coverage, and there's a difference in having kind of a run of touchdowns because you just happen to run to the right place and the defense messes up, and that's what it was. And Adam Gase apparently was a big fan of Griffin, so the Jets gave him that extension. I guess it was one of those send a message to the locker room type deals, but Griffin, very limited skill set, and you saw that the last 2 years. I mean, he was not as productive. I'm sorry, I thought you could tell. It was pretty obvious to me in 2019 that the production was not going to continue. And the extension, well, it really was not damaging to the Jets. Did not really help the Jets either. They could have easily moved on from Griffin after the 2019 season. So the move saves them $3 million. And at the end of the day, Griffin, I've talked about this. I think Griffin has one skill. He can find a hole in his own short, which is not useless. I mean, listen, Griffin's not the worst tight end in the NFL, but he's not good enough to play a primary role in your offense. And now that Uzama and Conklin have been added, it was pretty obvious his days were numbered here, especially with that $3 million cap hit. I mean, you're not going to keep your number 3 tight end at $3 million. You might keep your number 2 tight end at $3 million, but given how aggressive the Jets were at the tight end position this offseason, I think that was a sign that they knew it was time to move on from Ryan Griffin. So no surprise, but Ryan Griffin's Jets career ends. You may remember back on cutdown day last August, the Jets briefly cut him to get into compliance on their 53-man roster, and then a day later, after they made a few maneuvers, they brought Griffin back. That seems unlikely this time because they have Uzama and Conklin. Last time it was one of those things where there was it kind of felt like there was a deal that the Jets told Griffin, listen, we just got to cut you for the day. We're going to bring you back tomorrow, though. Griffin agreed to it. This time, it's pretty obvious that they signed Griffin's replacements, and there's just no spot for him on this team. So Ryan Griffin's Jets career ends after 3 seasons. And that's what we have to talk about today. That's all for today. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, if you enjoy the show, subscribe to it. Leave it a 5-star review if you're listening on a podcast source. And please give it a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. It helps the channel out, and it helps other Jets fans find this podcast. I hope you have a great Tuesday, everybody, and send in your mailbag questions, because tomorrow we will have our weekly mailbag show here on the podcast.